Good evening, brave souls. I'm Grim. They call me a ghost now, but I was once like you, alive. Tonight, I'll be your companion through the shadows. So, get comfortable, if you're ready. The night has only just begun, and the stories are waiting to be told. When Mia and Josh moved into their trailer with their toddler, Ethan, they expected a peaceful new beginning. But from the moment they unpacked, strange things began to happen. It started small, just the occasional flicker of lights, or the feeling that someone was watching them. But at night, when the house was still, Mia would step outside to smoke, and that's when she'd hear it. The sound of tiny feet racing across the floor inside. "Josh, did you hear that?" Mia whispered one night, stepping back inside, glancing nervously down the hall. Josh shrugged. Probably Ethan dreaming. He's a restless sleeper. But every time Mia checked on Ethan, he was fast asleep, his small form still under the blankets, undisturbed. And there was no one else in the house. Weeks went by, and things grew stranger. Ethan refused to sleep in his room. Whenever Mia or Josh carried him to bed, he'd cry until they brought him back to the living room. They chalked it up to the new environment. Then came the night that changed everything. Mia had just taken Ethan out of the bath and was drying him off when the familiar sound of running footsteps echoed through the house. But this time it was louder, closer. Mia froze, clutching Ethan in her arms. The footsteps pounded down the hall toward their bedroom. Josh, standing beside her, felt the floor shake beneath his feet. The footsteps stopped abruptly at their door. "What the?" Josh muttered, racing to fling open the door. No one was there. Mia's heart pounded as she looked at her son. "It's not just in my head, Josh." Ethan's toys added to the mystery. Any time he napped in his room, they would go off by themselves, filling the trailer with eerie, random tunes. Mia, desperate to stop the noise, removed the batteries from the toys. But one toy, Ethan's favorite, continued to light up and play its song. No batteries. One evening, unable to take it anymore, Mia spoke to their elderly neighbor, an old man who had lived in the area for decades. "I'm not sure what to make of it," Mia confessed. "Strange things happen in our trailer, and it's getting worse." The neighbor's face grew grim. "A family lived there before you. They had a young boy. He died in a car accident just a few years ago." Mia's blood ran cold. Could the spirit of that boy still be in their home? That night, as Mia and Josh tucked Ethan into bed, they felt the heavy presence of something unseen. But it didn't feel threatening anymore, just sad, like a lost soul searching for something. The footsteps never stopped, but somehow Mia felt comfort in knowing the truth. The little boy, it seemed, just wanted to play. The house was perfect. It was an old two-story place, charming in its own way, and had belonged to an older couple who had recently passed away. When my wife, Sarah, and I moved in, she was especially excited about one thing: the piano. She had always loved playing, and with a music room already set up in the house, it felt like it was meant for her. It was even more special because the previous owner had been a piano teacher, giving lessons right in that very room. For the first few years, life was peaceful in the house. Sarah would play her piano in the evenings while I sat in the living room, and soon after, our son Ben was born. As soon as Ben was old enough to reach the piano keys, he'd tinker around, pressing random notes, smiling at the sounds he could make. It was adorable, and we were happy that he was showing an interest in music so young. One night, years later, Ben was 5 years old. Sarah and I were watching a rerun of the show Cheers, relaxing after a long day. Suddenly we heard music coming from the music room, the first 6 notes of the Cheers theme song. Sarah looked at me, confused. Did Ben learn that? I asked, sitting up straighter. I don't think so, Sarah replied, her brow furrowed. We both got up and went to the music room, where Ben was sitting at the piano, pressing the keys with surprising confidence. Over and over, he played the first 6 notes of the theme song. We were amazed. Ben, I asked gently, did you figure out how to play that by yourself? Ben looked up at us with a wide grin. No, the lady showed me. Sarah and I exchanged nervous glances. What lady, sweetheart? Sarah asked, her voice soft but wary. The piano lady, Ben said innocently. She comes when I play and helps me learn. She's nice. Chills ran down my spine. We hadn't told Ben about the house's previous owner, nor had we mentioned anything about her being a piano teacher. Sarah knelt down beside Ben. What does she look like? Sarah asked, trying to stay calm. Ben thought for a moment. She has gray hair and wears a blue dress. She smiles a lot. My heart skipped a beat. We had found an old photo of the previous owner when we moved in. A kind-looking woman with gray hair, always wearing a blue dress in her pictures. We didn't know what to think. But from that day on, we always felt like there was someone else in the house with us. Ben continued to play, and sometimes, late at night, we'd hear soft notes coming from the piano room, gentle, quiet, as if someone was teaching him. One night, Sarah whispered to me, "Do you think she's still here?" The piano teacher? I nodded slowly. Maybe she never really left. Maybe she's just watching over him. It wasn't scary, not exactly. There was a strange comfort in knowing that the music, in some way, lived on in our home. And as Ben's little hands continued to glide over the keys, we couldn't help but wonder if, somewhere in the shadows, she was smiling, proud of her new student. It was just another quiet, uneventful night in our small rural town. Jake and I had a tradition, sneaking out in the dead of night and exploring places where we probably shouldn't be. It was harmless fun, or at least that's what we always told ourselves. But there was something about the night that made everything feel different. One night, without much of a plan, we decided to head to the park on the outskirts of town. The place had once been the site of old farms, but now it was a recreational area with playgrounds, sports fields, and a small creek. There was something about the park, though, that always felt a little off, especially at night. The town had done a good job of clearing the area, but it still felt like something old and forgotten lingered there. We climbed the fence to get inside, our usual adrenaline-fueled adventure. "Bet you can't catch me," I shouted as I dashed away, laughing. Jake gave chase, and we started a game of hide-and-seek under the eerie glow of the park's few lamp posts. I thought I was clever when I climbed onto the roof of the toilet booth. From up there, I could see the whole area. Jake wouldn't think to look up here, I figured. After a few minutes, I saw him standing near a bench just 50 meters away, his figure lit up by the faint glow of a street light. But something was wrong. Jake wasn't moving. He was just standing there, staring in my direction. "Jake?" I called, but he didn't respond. My heart started to race, my skin prickling with unease. I waved at him. Slowly, he waved back, but it wasn't normal. His arm moved stiffly, like a puppet being pulled by invisible strings. Something inside me told me to stop watching, but I couldn't look away. "Quit messing with me, Jake," I shouted. But still, he stood, frozen, staring. I had enough. I jumped down from the booth, and as I hit the ground, I heard footsteps approaching from behind me. "Hey, what's up?" Jake's voice startled me. I turned to see him standing there, breathing heavily from running. But he was coming from the opposite direction, the exact opposite of where I had just seen him standing moments before. "What? How did you?" I stammered, pointing to the spot near the bench. Jake looked just as confused. "I thought you were following me. I heard your footsteps behind me the whole time," he said. glancing nervously around. "There's no way you could have been there. I just saw you. Over there." I pointed again to the bench, but now there was nothing. Just the empty park and the dim light flickering above it. We both stood in silence for a moment, trying to make sense of what just happened, but there was no explanation. A chill ran down my spine, and I could tell Jake felt it too. "We need to get out of here," Jake muttered, and I didn't argue. After that night, we never returned to that park. Whenever we passed it, Jake's dog would bark wildly, refusing to go any closer. There was something wrong with that place, something we couldn't explain. Even now, thinking about that shadowy figure, I get chills. Was it something ancient from the forgotten ruins, or something darker that the town had tried to bury? We never found out. But one thing was for sure. We weren't alone that night. Latifa Nazmi's life, marked by ambition and tragedy, would lead her to a horror she could never have imagined. Born in the humble town of Damietta, Latifa was no ordinary girl. Her father, a fisherman, worked tirelessly to provide for his family, but opportunities were scarce. Latifa, however, was determined to educate herself. She would collect old magazines and teach herself English, dreaming of a life beyond the confines of her small town. Her talents didn't go unnoticed. One day, she was given the chance to act in a local play. The world of theater opened up to her, and soon she caught the attention of the famous actor Yusuf Wabi, who saw in her the makings of a star. She flourished, and with her newfound success, she moved to Cairo, her dream city. Despite her rise to fame, Latifa remained loyal to her family. She shared her wealth with her parents and her uncle's children, never forgetting where she came from. Her life was a fairy tale, or so it seemed. One fateful evening, she met a charming doctor who lived in the same building. He was mysterious, always rushing off to late-night emergencies. But Latifa was smitten. They quickly married. At first, the doctor's long absences seemed to have reasonable explanations. But over time, his disappearances grew longer, more frequent. Worried and desperate, Latifa began searching for answers. One night, she ventured into his forbidden room and found strange papers covered in symbols, along with a list of women's names. The women had all been murdered. Latifa's heart pounded in her chest. Something far darker than she had imagined was going on. Terrified, she consulted a wise sheikh. His words chilled her to the bone. Her husband was not human. He dealt with powerful jinn and feared two things: nighttime and the Quran. He warned her to leave before it was too late. That night, Latifa began playing the Quran on a gramophone, and after weeks of absence, her husband finally returned. He was furious. "Stop it!" he yelled, rushing to his secret room, his face twisted in rage when he discovered she had found his papers. Suddenly, he lunged at her, his hands around her throat. In a panic, Latifa turned up the volume of the Quran. Her husband froze, his body stiffening unnaturally. Seizing the moment, she struck him on the head, knocking him unconscious. Breathless, she called Yusuf Wabi, who arrived just as the police were summoned. The police soon uncovered the horrific truth. Latifa's husband was an escaped patient from a psychiatric hospital, a killer who had been using black magic and the power of jinn to commit his murders. But the horror didn't end there. Latifa discovered she was pregnant. The child was born deformed, a creature not entirely human, and died soon after. Haunted by the events, Latifa was eventually committed to a mental hospital, where she lived out her final days. Though her life ended in tragedy, her story remains a chilling reminder of the dangers lurking in the shadows, hidden beneath charm and beauty. Latifah's tale, full of ambition, betrayal, and supernatural horror, would live on in whispers, forever tied to the dark magic and jinn that consumed her life. And as the darkness fades, remember, the real chills linger long after the story's end. Until next time, brave souls.